Up next on the Decade Arcade is Strider. As a big fan of ninjas and a big fan of Metroidvanias, I've been looking forward to playing this game for a while, and at the end of the day, my opinion of the game is complicated. Without any further ado, let's jump into it. In Strider, you are playing as Hiryu, who is a Strider, otherwise known as a ninja, basically, who is tasked with destroying the Grand Master of this dystopian cyberpunk universe you find yourself in. Unfortunately, it being cyberpunk does not fully entail that it will be as neon and colorful as maybe Cyberpunk 2077 is. It's a lot of drab metal everywhere, which leads us into talking about the graphics of Strider. Strider's graphics overall are decent to good. The issue I come up with is it is a lot of metal. It might be a laboratory made of metal, it might be a city made of metal, but it's just a lot of drab gray looking metal with little tiny pops of color on some enemies as well as Strider and some of the bosses. It's good to look at, but it gets a little monotonous and boring because it's all just very the same looking, which does not do any favors for the combat, nor does it do any favors for the exploration. The few favors that it does provide as far as the combat goes is it is very readable. However, the battles don't look distinguished enough and different from each other, so the whole trek through the game just looks the same. At least for me, that's what it felt like. So, combat is good. However, I feel it does not provide enough variety compared to other Metroidvanias. It's basically you are slashing blue, or you are slashing red, or orange, or purple. That's the gist of it. They all have slightly different elements, but they do not do nearly enough to differentiate themselves. And eventually you can throw kunai. That's about it. And so the combat is pretty much just you running around as Strider. Yeah. That's it. That's the combat. That's it. It just did not feel very fun at the end of the day. At the end of the game, I should say. It was fun for a solid chunk of the game, but by the end of it, I was like, there was not enough variety here. For me personally. On the exploration side, it felt like a Metroidvania. I cannot deny that. However, it felt monotonous and boring at times because, for one, the environment just looks the same the whole way through. So distinguishing between things doesn't feel that interesting. And then for two, outside of the basic advancements you make in Metroidvanias, you can double jump now, you can air dash, stuff like that. The basic way you were unlocking things and progressing further through the game is like, you can now slash fire, so this fire door can't stand in front of you. You can now slash ice, so this ice wall can't sit in front of you. So most of the unlocking mechanisms in the game for things were a little too similar. You would come up to parts where you need to dash or double jump or whatever else, but it just never fully clicked for me personally. I'd rather be playing a different Metroidvania. It's a good game as a whole, just feels like there's other Metroidvanias that kind of beat the game out. The sound design of Strider is overall good, I would say, but the way that the music is implemented, it's a little too quiet, so a lot of the time I didn't even fully realize that there was a soundtrack. There's just so much of the enemies blasting and Strider yelling as he's slashing and all these things going on that you can't fully recognize what's going on musically. The sound design of the game outside of the music is fine. Everything sounds clear. I'm sure they were going for a little bit of the old school feel with the way that the game plays out with Hiryu yelling excessively and everything, but again, Just nothing that really, for me, as somebody who this is my first instance of playing Strider in his designated environment, nothing that really pulled me in or felt worthwhile to me. The soundtrack is good, but I had to go listen to it outside of playing the game to really understand that the soundtrack is good. Overall, the story plays out pretty well as a whole, if not very basic. You are Strider, you go kill the guy, that's it. The cutscenes are very static. Your characters just stand there, they don't move their mouths, they don't have expressions, nothing really to write home about unless you're talking about how boring it is. Nothing feels that fun about the story as a whole. It's decent, it gets the job done. It's a Metroidvania. Stories in Metroidvania sometimes aren't that big of a deal anyway, so it's fine. And then even outside of that, the presentation of the story also suffers because they will have these parts of the story delivered as you're playing the game. So as I mentioned earlier, enemies are shooting you, and then you hear this guy in the background trying to establish story, sounding like the Charlie Brown teacher, because ultimately you're not paying attention to him and you don't care because you are busy with everything else going on in the map. So it just felt like the story was lacking because of the presentation of the story. The story itself is fine, but it's nothing to write home about, and then the presentation drags it down to just being like, I didn't care that much, which is a shame because I really like the concept that all of it is going for. I just feel the presentation could be better. The boss and enemy design in the game is good. There's a lot of solid variation to the enemies. It is mostly just, there's that one guy with the gun, there's that one guy with the shield, there's those bigger guys, and then like a few other bigger guys and some robots for the basic enemies. Occasionally some other stuff gets splashed in, but because of the way that the element swords work and like each enemy resists certain elements and everything, and you have to switch between the sword types like on the fly sometimes, it let the overall enemy variety feel like it was doing something good, even if it's on the lower end of how much is going on. The boss design, like most Metroidvanias, is the best part of the game, I feel like. It is a lot of variety besides like these three sisters that are supposed to look the same because they're like the Sisters of the Wind. And even they have like different kits and everything. So all the bosses fulfilled their Metroidvania type feel of like solving how to beat the boss. And some of the bosses can be a little frustrating, but once you learn their pattern, you just breeze through them. So like the difficulty of the game in that regard too was like very fluctuating. You would be like down here losing, and then you'd be up here just like smoking them and it doesn't even matter. Which, you know, is kind of what you want from a game. Like, you get the shit beat out of you and then you learn the game and then you trounce it. So I wouldn't even count that against Strider, really. It's just the way it kind of plays out is all. And then, so to summarize Strider, combat, fun at first, gets monotonous and boring. Environments and graphics, they're right, and they get a little monotonous and boring. Boss design, good. I appreciate it. Good job, the boss. Play patterns were also very good. It was a very like, you need to learn what to do to beat this boss. And then you beat them and you're just like, oh, okay, that was cool. That was a nice challenge. Music, again, it's good, but I feel like the sound balancing was a little out of whack between the sound effects and the game music in the background. So as a whole, summing up all of Strider, adding all of those up, it's just okay. It would not be my first choice if I am craving a Metroidvania, personally. It's good. It just feels like it's right on the verge of being something even greater with a few tweaks. And that's for me personally. I know there's going to be a lot of people that just really, really like this game because they really like Strider, really like everything it's going for. but for me personally, it felt lacking compared to a lot of even indie Metroidvanias and stuff that I've played recently. As a whole, for the price, I would say go for it. Ultimately, it costs like $20, but you can very, very, very often find the game on sale for $5. So for $5, getting a pretty decent Metroidvania experience, it's good. It's worth it. It's just, if I see any of the indie Metroidvanias I like a lot go on sale for $5, I'd probably point you towards those instead. But it really depends on what you're looking for in a Metroidvania. Are you looking for goth medieval vibes? Bloodstained. Are you looking for cutesy forest vibes? Ori. Are you looking for darkish, brooding, but still cutesy vibes? Hollow Knight. You looking for cyberpunk, dystopian ninja? Strider. That's on the graphic side. And then obviously you have, how do they all play out combat-wise? How do they all play out with their story and their exploration and everything? So it just really kind of depends. Overall, Strider is good. And that about wraps it up for this episode of Decade Arcade, where we tell you if you should be picking up the games from 10 years ago. This has been Victorian Genetics. If you liked the video, be sure to leave a thumbs up on the video, comment with any comment down below, and be sure to subscribe for more videos in the future. I will catch you guys in the next one. Game on.